This week we're going to look at some of the things that are going on in the world. We're going to focus a little bit on culture and then the Islamic State in Iraq and a little bit on Israel. We talk a lot about the convergence of events, and it seems like everything is really in play. I had some meeting with some guys in a prophecy group that we formed, and when we talked about it, we continually talked about the fact that everything is in play. Everything that the prophetic scriptures talks about is in play. It's happening to the point where it could be fulfilled very soon. Some of it is being fulfilled. It's a very exciting time to be alive, but it's also a very troubling time to be alive because it seems as if the world is falling apart. It is. But that's what the world is going to be like, Jesus said, when he comes. And he says we're supposed to have hope, trust in his coming. He's going to come and clean up the mess and do that. I only threw this in because I like this, it's the Wailing Wall and some signs in the heavens. I thought that was kind of a cool picture. We were just out west. This map has probably changed a little bit in the last week. The entire Southwest is in a pretty severe drought. We get a lot of food from the Central Valley of California, which is the really dark area here, which is the exceptional drought area. And this doesn't appear that it's going to change some, although people are running around in California saying that they're going to have 40 inches of rain this year, this winter, and that means we're going to have a really bad winter here, but that's too bad for you guys. We're going to get our rain. And I'm not going to comment too much on this thing in Missouri because it's still kind of a fluid situation, and a lot of the facts aren't known yet. But one of my concerns is this. We know that in the end times that the Antichrist will be put in place and he will be a ruthless dictator. And one of the things that concerns me is, and I support police, I want you to know that, but I'm very concerned about the militarization of our police. I mean, this is police officers in a suburb of St. Louis, folks. They have troop carriers, armored troop carriers, and this does not bode well for our freedoms here. It just does not. I don't know how else to say it, and it's something that we should expect. And if you become people that are marginalized in society, they're going to turn that power on you. And I'm very concerned. I'm all for law and order. You know that. But I am very, very concerned about these developments. We are, as one commentator said this week, we're not becoming a police state. We are a police state. And you look at the way the Obama administration has misused the IRS, and the IRS has announced now that they're going to go after churches. The atheists came in, the atheists complained, and so now the IRS is going to start monitoring churches. Okay, so let's just be clear. Our government is corrupt, and you need to vote to change the government. So if that violates the stupid IRS rules, then we'll lose our tax-exempt status. But you know what? I don't care, and we shouldn't be given here because we get tax deductions. But that's for another thing. Now, I'm going to say that because of the Hobby Lobby decision. I want to play a couple clips of Ruth Bader, almost called her Dimsberg, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, the esteemed justice, one of the senior justices of the U.S. Supreme Court. This is an interview she gave to Katie Couric a little over a week ago about the Hobby Lobby decision. And listen to what she says in this.
Let's talk about Hobby Lobby. Your 35-page dissent has been described as blistering and scathing. Why did you find this decision so disturbing?
The decision that an employer could refuse to cover contraceptives meant that women would have to take care of that for themselves or the men who cared. Contraceptive protection is something that every woman must have access to control her own destiny. I certainly respect the belief of the Hobby Lobby owners. On the other hand, they have no constitutional right to foist that belief on the hundreds and hundreds of women who work for them who don't share that belief. I had never seen the free exercise of religion clause interpreted in such a way.
Some people say there's something troubling about mandating a private company, though, to do something that is against their deeply held religious beliefs. What would you say to those people?
When you're part of a society, you can't separate yourself from the obligations that citizens have.
Okay, you know, folks, there's so much wrong with what that woman just said that I went to law school. I read the Constitution. I took con law, and she's the product of modern American law school education. In fact, she's probably part of the problem. The thing of the Constitution is you can't force a religion to do something against the religion. But you see how this crazy leftist judge flips everything upside down? Okay, now she's going to go on and talk about her fellow justices that formed the majority in that decision.
My point was that no employer, whatever the business form, should be able to transfer that employer's religious belief onto people who do not share that belief. One of the things I said in the opinion, the image was one has freedom to move one's arm until it hits the other fellow's nose. And it's the same way with speech, same way with religion. You can exercise your right freely until the point where it is affecting other people who don't share your views.
All three women justices were in the minority in the Hobby Lobby decision. Do you believe that the 5 male justices truly understood the ramifications of their decision?
I would have to say no. But justices continue to think and can change. So I am ever hopeful that if the court has a blind spot today, its eyes will be open tomorrow.
But you do in fact feel these 5 justices had a bit of a blind spot?
In Hobby Lobby? Yes. Yes,
And why was that?
Just the same kind of blind spot the majority had in Lilly Ledbetter's case.
Because they couldn't understand what it is like to be a woman?
They all have, they have wives, they have daughters. By the way, I think daughters can change the perception of their fathers.
What about Citizens United being treated as a person, being able to give unlimited money?
I can't say anything more about Citizens United other than read the dissent. You know, we have a great tradition in our country of justices who disagree with the court's opinion, explaining why they disagree. Many of those dissents are now unquestionably the law of the land. Think of the separate but equal doctrine, Plessy against Ferguson. There was a dissenter, the first Justice John Marshall Harlan. He dissented in Plessy against Ferguson, and that, of course, is the law of the land today.
So you think the same will happen to Citizens United in the future?
Yes, that is my expectation. I may not be around to see it, but it will happen.
Well, we can always hope. This is the problem with modern education, folks. You don't have the right. You have the right to move your arm until it contacts me. Well, but do you have the right to make me move my arm? Which is what she says is okay. So this is what we call postmodern thought. It's disconnected from reality. It's cognitive dissonance. It makes no sense. The problem is that this cultural view has come over into the church. And people now hold views, opposing views, that should make them wonder how they can hold these two different views. For example, let me give you one that I think has come up this week. We believe that the modern state of Israel, I believe the modern state of Israel is the fulfillment of Bible prophecy. Many other prophecy teachers, and I see this in increasingly being taught, believe that, no, the modern state of Israel is not a fulfillment of Bible prophecy, that the fulfillment will only come when Jesus comes and sets up his kingdom. But but I support Israel. They say, I support Israel. And the modern state of Israel is a Zionist conspiracy bent on world domination. It's very clever how they've persecuted themselves over the centuries and reduced their number to dominate the world. But they'll say, I support Israel, but I believe in a Zionist conspiracy that created Israel. And we know from Scripture that Israel will be regathered back in the land first in unbelief. That's what's happening now. And so it's all part of a process. But you see the cognitive dissonance. I support Israel, but it's a massive conspiracy of the New World Order. I just don't accept that. But I see that being taught more and more and more in what I would consider to be conservative, evangelical, Bible prophecy circles. To the extent that people are actually teaching about Bible prophecy, that's happening. So, I don't know where this thing is going to go, this Ebola virus. They brought a guy to the United States that had the Ebola, a couple people that had the Ebola virus had never been in the United States before. I hear they're getting better. But look at what this was from Time magazine, hardly a right-wing source, talking about the Center for Disease Control in Atlanta. Dr. Bruce Bibner, infectious disease physician, on those who did not believe his unit at Emory University Hospital, which has led the care of American patients with the Ebola virus, would prove useful. So a lot of people saw this as Noah's Ark. This is where we protect everybody from that, not where we bring the disease in, actually. Well, let's talk a little bit about this meltdown in the Middle East and some of the things that are going on. This has been fascinating to watch over the last 2 months with the rise of ISIS. Now, this map is from a month ago, and this map is out of date. The blue areas are the areas that ISIS controls, although now they control all of this area, and they control a large part of what was formerly controlled by the Kurds. They have the major, and the areas that are in gray here are areas that are pretty much devoid of any human population anywhere because they're pretty severe desert. So they've gotten along the rivers. They control a couple dams. They control the large Mosul Dam. The report that our Army Corps of Engineers did a couple years ago said that if that dam failed, and if that dam is not continually maintained, it will fail within a year because it's very poorly constructed, that if that dam failed, it would send a wall of water 65 feet high through Mosul and would flood Baghdad, probably even the big, huge embassy that we built and still have in the city of Baghdad, the United States government. So the Kurdish area, the Kurds have withdrawn from a lot of the area. They are pushing back some. There's a new Iraqi government. Things are very much in a state of flux, but the reports coming out of there are just, I don't know if you saw last week's prophecy update, just these heart-wrenching testimony of people that have been there from the Yazidi people and from Christians in Mosul and elsewhere about just the horrible atrocities being committed by the Islamic State, or what also is called ISIS or ISIL, the Islamic State, and the beheadings, children being chopped in half, people shot, executed, buried alive, and we'll just look a little bit at those reports. But the first one, let's look at the Mosul Dam.
Now to Iraq, where U.S. and Kurdish forces today launched coordinated attacks on the ISIS militants who have captured a major dam near Mosul in the northern part of the country. Charlie Daggett joins us now from Iraq. Charlie?
Well, Jim, the fight began this morning, but tonight Iraqi and Kurdish forces in the middle of a major battle to take back that dam. They're getting backup from U.S. airstrikes and an expansion of the U.S. military campaign here. Late last week, video emerged of ISIS militants parading on top of Iraq's biggest dam and posing one of their biggest threats. Blowing it up or opening its floodgates could send a wall of water toward Mosul that would eventually even reach Baghdad. But in their fight against ISIS, Peshmerga soldiers told us their weapons are no match for their better armed enemy. Lieutenant Colonel Majid Sindi showed us the shrapnel wounds he suffered while trying to evacuate the thousands of Yazidi religious followers trapped on Mount Sinjar. He said ISIS hit them with everything they had. Assault rifles, mortars, rocket-propelled grenades, armored vehicles with heavy machine guns, he said. The artillery the American government gave the Iraqi army is now in the hands of ISIS. Kurdish fighters are using outdated equipment, some volunteers bringing their own weapons. This man says his ammunition won't last 2 hours. Do you believe the Peshmerga can beat ISIS?
Galak.
100%.
Galak.
The Peshmerga said all they need are more heavy weapons and more U.S. airstrikes. U.S. military officials say drones conducted airstrikes against ISIS militants who were suspected in taking part in the massacre of 80 Yazidi men. They're reportedly told to convert to Islam or die. Kurdish officials say more than 300 Yazidis died in that village alone. Jim?
Charlie Daggett covering for us in Iraq tonight. Charlie, thank you.
And they're told if you don't convert, you need to pay the tax, the jizya. And if you don't pay the jizya, and you decide to leave, then they rob you on the way out. So you leave with nothing. So I'll talk about that in just a minute. ISIS has said, this was tweeted by one of the ISIS guys just last night, that they want to take back Spain. Battles taking place. This is up here in the northern part. This is Mosul up here to the north. Mosul Dam north goes this way. Abril is a very significant city. It's in a Kurdish capital. We have a massive embassy there. We're very concerned about those people because of what happened in Benghazi. If it happened in Erbil, it would be on a scale of magnitude much, much beyond Benghazi because of the different people that we have there support things for Iraqi military. To the left there, it's about 150 miles down south to Baghdad. This is the Kurdish area here, very mountainous, rugged terrain. And this is a lot of this now. They came within here, which was about 25 miles from Abril, the Islamic State. Not good news. And the Kurds, as they said, are trying to fight back this act of genocide. At the same time, and this is what's kind of interesting about all of this, that there's so much going on that you don't even know about the other bad stuff that's happening, in that ISIS is now taken over a larger portion of Syria. So much so that the rebels in Syria, which, we have the Assad government, we have the rebels, and then we have ISIS, which used to be part of the rebels, but now ISIS is taking over the rebels. And now the rebels are getting squeezed both by ISIS and the Assad government, and they don't believe that they will be able to hold out much longer. So it's going to be ISIS versus the Assad government at some point. Now, those rebels will probably join ISIS. So ISIS, nobody knows how many fighters they have. Some say 10, 15,000. Some say they've grown to 50 to 100,000. People join them. It's easier to join them than fight them, because you fight them, you get killed, you get shot in the head, you get your head chopped off, you get buried alive. Not very good options. And again, you see the dark areas are where ISIS is pretty much in control, all the way even down to Fallujah, which is just outside of Baghdad. And again, these areas here in between, they've come along the rivers, the Tigris and then the Euphrates. They're knocking on the door of Aleppo. That's where the rebels are holding out. The Syrian army under Assad is pushing into Aleppo as we speak, and that's where the rebels are trying to hold out, and they're getting slaughtered by both sides. So this whole thing has changed. There's not really the Iraq that we knew anymore. It's really changed. And then this thing with the Yazidi people. Here's just a little video about that.
Just got news that there has been a massacre in a village south of Sinjar, some 20 kilometres south of Sinjar. We understand that it has been surrounded for some time by these ISIS militants. Well, today they moved in, murdering 80 men. They are the reports that we're getting from the Kurdish regional government, as well as from the spiritual leader of the Yazidis. And we understand also that at least 100 women were taken to Mosul and other prisons nearby. So this is obviously a huge concern to the Yazidi population and to the Yazidi leadership, if you like, the spiritual leaders who are looking over these people, because there are reports that ISIS militants are coming in and they are taking these women and children. They're separated from the men. The men are killed, and then the women are taken to these prisons, sold off, or used for sex slaves. Now, it's not just one report. There are many reports coming into it. So obviously a growing concern as these ISIS militants continue to attack the villages and try to exterminate the Yazidis, Hala.
And what about the camps where you are now? I imagine it's yet another crisis the UN and other aid agencies are having to deal with after so many before them.
Yeah, Hala, we spent the day with the governor of Duhok, and he is absolutely overwhelmed with this humanitarian crisis. He says, I can feed the people for a week, maybe 2 weeks, but after that, I can't. I don't have the resources, I don't have the skills, I don't have the manpower. This is a man who's been in the job for all of 4 weeks, and now he is having to oversee this exodus of people, house them, feed them, clothe them, provide them with medical facilities. 250,000 people came just from Sinjar, let alone the other religious minorities who've come from villages in the past few weeks, as well as those from Mosul back in June, and then the Syrians before that. So you're talking about hundreds of thousands of people. We were with him whilst he was handing out cash payments to some of these refugees, and they're staying in not just UN camps, but also in abandoned buildings, in schools. They've just taken over schools and under the bridge. You know, we spoke to one man who said that, you know, he thought he was going to die on Mount Sinjar. Now he's here. What is his future? So this governor, Hala, he is calling on the UN, the international community, to act now. As far as he is concerned, they are failing these people.
Well, dire situation. This is a graphic from, I think, the Daily Mail in England about the British Special Forces that went in to Mount Sinjar. Mount Sinjar is a mountain about 5,000 feet above sea level at the top. It kind of rises up off of a plain. It's about 4 to 10 miles wide. It's about 30 to 50 miles long, and that's where the people went. And so they went in with helicopters, and I think you've seen some of the videos of these desperate people where they were throwing children on the helicopters, and they were throwing their wives on there, and they were taking off, and they didn't know where they were going to go and whether they would ever see them again. Just really heart-wrenching stuff as hundreds of thousands of Iraqis are displaced. These are some of the homes that you see on Mount Sinjar. We sent our special forces in, and they said, well, everything looked okay, so they withdrew. They didn't do that much. But some of the people have said, well, the problem was that they landed on the north side of the mountain, and everybody that was refugees were on the south side. So the south people on the south side never saw anybody. So I don't know. I don't know if this was just a put-up thing to say that we've done our job and everything is okay, but it is still a major humanitarian crisis in this area. The Yazidi people, they are kind of a strange religious mix. They baptize their people. They believe in God, but they're sort of dualist in the sense that they believe that God's goodness isn't known without evil, so they worship both sides of it. It's a cult. It's maybe 700,000 to 1 million people, and they're at risk. Their women are being taken, raped, sold as sex slaves, sold as wives. The children are being taken. The men are being killed. It's a desperate situation for them. And this is a picture of Mount Sinjar. You can see how it kind of rises up out of the plain. And so I don't know if I don't know if our government did their job or not. President Obama came off the golf course and said everything was fine, so.
Breaking news tonight from Iraq. There are reports that ISIS terrorists have massacred dozens of Yazidis in a village in the country's north, just miles from Mount Sinjar. Senior Foreign Affairs correspondent Greg Palcott is live tonight in Erbil. Hello again, Greg.
Hello, Shannon. Yeah, multiple sources confirmed to Fox News that a terrible tragedy has occurred today in the village of Kujo, that is 10 miles south of Mount Sinjar. The residents there apparently did not agree to ISIS demands to convert to Islam, and so at least 80 men were killed, dozens of women and children were kidnapped, and just minutes ago, CENTCOM has reported that it has sent unmanned drones over that village and hit ISIS locations in response to those reports. All this comes just one day after President Obama has said the siege of Yazidis on Mount Sinjar itself was over. The flood of refugees leaving that mountain and area continues. 25,000 have come in just the last 3 days.
Rising numbers of displaced people coming from Sinjar district and Sinjar mountains have been crossing this pontoon behind me over the last 48 hours.
All across northern Iraq, the search is on for food, shelter, sustenance. With hundreds of thousands of refugees fleeing the ISIS militants, these desperate people are looking for any place to stay, including a half-finished office building. Young people, old people, entire families living rough under a roof. Those sheltered at this location in Erbil are Christian refugees. The Chaldean Catholic Church alone is running 25 refugee centers. Still, while they say they can provide 3 meals a day to these sad people, they cannot supply hope, says Erbil Archbishop Bashar al-Warda.
Most of them would like to go back to prepare their papers and leave the country.
And leave?
Leave the country.
No hope?
No way.
Still, some in Iraq do have guarded hope now that the divisive Nouri al-Maliki has announced he will give up power and allow Prime Minister-designate Haider al-Abadi to take over. He promised today his new government would have integrity in dealing with the problems Iraq faces.
I hope that the new government will change the conditions, but it is very difficult.
Some are expressing reservations about the United States' role in helping deal with those problems. One Iraqi branded Obama as hesitant. There is a legacy to maintain, says the Archbishop.
We have to remember the lives of thousands of the Americans who sacrificed themselves. You cannot just, neglect everything and say, no, we've ended everything. It's not ended.
With new reports of clashes between ISIS and Iraqi forces just 70 miles north of Baghdad, the fight looks far from over. The European Union today cleared the way for member countries, including the UK and France, to help arm the Kurdish Peshmerga fighters. With ISIS bearing down, the U.S. has already indicated it will. Shannon.
Thank you so much.
So these are the numbers. Now, what a lot of us didn't know was that between January and May in the western part of Iraq, 500,000 Iraqis were displaced. They had to leave where they lived to move someplace else because ISIS was moving through the area. A lot of them went to Syria. A lot of them went towards Mosul. Now that they've moved to Mosul, so between January and end of May, 500,000 people were displaced. You add that on top of the fact that within Syria itself over the last 3 years, since March of 2011 when the Syrian protests started in Daraa, to today, the estimates are that 50% of the Syrian population has been displaced. 21 million people, and 10 million or more are not where they used to live in 3 years. This is a huge humanitarian thing. They've gone to Jordan, they've gone elsewhere. People in those camps are very open to things that ISIS is saying. Now in June and July, since middle of June to now, 2 months, another 500,000 people have been displaced by ISIS. So 1 million Iraqis are not where they were at the beginning of the year. That's a lot of people in a country the size of Iraq to house someplace else. So, and then I think you saw those reports that they executed 700 people. So major crisis. Some people think that the formation of this Islamic State is the beginning of the coalition of nations that will come against Israel in a Psalm 83 war. I think it's part of that. There'll be other nations, but certainly I believe that the Iraq part, the Iraq-Syria part of that, will come from this formation of the Islamic State. So even though President Obama said everything was okay, 700 people in Syria were executed and around 1,000 or so in Iraq. Now, another significant player that you probably haven't even heard that much about is Turkey. Turkey kind of sits right there in the middle of the former Soviet Union, the European Union, Africa, Asia. Used to be a major power. You can see the outline of the extent of the Ottoman Empire that existed for 400 years, from about 1517 to 1917. Erdogan became, within the last week, I think elections were last Sunday, he became the first directly elected president in the history of modern Turkey. Modern Turkey formed about 1922. So Erdogan is the guy that back in 2007 objected to someone calling that there was a moderate Islam. He said there is no moderate or immoderate Islam. Islam is Islam, and that's it. It seems that people say stuff like this all the time that are part of Islam, but the people in our government don't seem to believe them. In 2002, just as he was barred from running for office because he had quoted this poet, quite the poem, in 2002. The mosques are our barracks, the domes are helmets, the minarets are bayonets, and the faithful are soldiers. And Erdogan went to prison in Turkey for a little while, then later became prime minister for 11 years and now the president. You should know that his foreign affairs advisor is a former professor who is virulently anti-Israel. And he is his main foreign affairs advisor. And in fact, that gentleman, I can't remember his name right off the top of my head. I can see his picture in my mind. He is likely to be the new prime minister of Turkey. Erdogan couldn't run for prime minister again, so he's changing the government so he can maintain his power. And he received about 52% of the vote in Turkey. And then he was interviewed a few weeks ago on CNN by their foreign affairs correspondent about the situation in Gaza. And this is what this man, who many consider to be a moderate Muslim from moderate Islam, which he doesn't believe exists, but nevertheless, some people insist that he is from a moderate camp, and this is what he had to say. This will be a translation.
Given the increasingly depressing situation on the ground in the conflict between Israel and Gaza, I want to get your sense of the situation on the ground. So, your assessment, if you will, of the Israel-Gaza situation.
Ben Sharon'la Tel Aviv'de görüştüğümde
when I met Sharon in Tel Aviv, he used an expression saying, "The most enjoyable moments of my life are those when I was on top of tanks in Palestine." I can never forget this. Of course, it clearly displays the viewpoint of one human toward another. At the moment, Israel's position in Palestine is apparent. When we meet and discuss with our American friends, whether it's Mr. Bush or Mr. Obama, they always refer to a two-state structure in the region, in the form of Israel-Palestine. And we kept working on this with Palestine all the time, meaning you accept Israel and let Israel accept you. And facing such a picture, it's beyond comprehension that Israel is still defended by the West, and the world is silent about it. Therefore, we cannot remain silent, and we will not be silent.
You have you've invoked Hitler in accusing them of their actions in Gaza. You've talked about genocide. Do you stand by those comments?
I completely stand by my comments. Because Nazism, the fascism that was applied by Hitler, if you put all these on the table just like that, you can see that what Israel does to Palestine, to Gaza right now, has surpassed what Hitler did to them. We don't approve, we don't accept what Hitler did either, but right now we do not accept this persecution, the massacre, the genocide by Israel. Hamas and Fatah unified in respect of this two-state structure, and they formed a national consensus government. Israel does not want this government to make progress, they want to break it up. And in fact, they told this to Mr. Abbas. Mr. Abbas says, "This is the pressure that is applied on me." And he told us this very clearly and openly. Israel is disturbed of a unification here. This is what primarily lies under the problem behind these current attacks.
And he went on to say some other things about the president. We'll escape that. So when Israel went into Gaza, it was very interesting. In one of the bunkers, locations that they went into, the military went into, they found this manual. And in this manual, it talked about how the one way to avoid attack was to use human shields. To use children, schools, mosques. This was all designed as a plan. And when Israel defended themselves, they get castigated, and by Islamists like Erdogan, they get called that they are said to have surpassed Hitler. I can't change Zephaniah. Zephaniah prophesies another Holocaust coming, and what you should see in this is that all of this is being set up for another Holocaust. This is a little 1-minute clip. These are rocket strikes from the beginning of the Gaza incursion back in mid-July until now. These are the rockets that landed in Israel from, I've compressed it all into 1 minute. Modern technology. But I'm just, now if this was happening in Columbus, would we take out Michigan? Or whatever, wherever it was coming. Likely it's going to come from the evil always comes from the north, they say. So Angie's over there. She's never coming back, I know. She's So here we go. And the ones that up here, this is Tel Aviv, and the airport's right in this area. So when they started landing in that area, that's when everything got real. That was a game changer. So 50% with the different rockets, 50% of Israel is, well, virtually 90% of their population was within the range of the rockets launched in the last month or so. But again, just as evidence that our government doesn't get it, here's an interview with Michael Bloomberg, former mayor of New York, and Valerie Jarrett, commonly called Barack Obama's conscience. First Bloomberg will speak, then Valerie Jarrett.
It's difficult to watch the images that we air on our network and other networks. This week, a school attack that had thousands in there. It was described as bloody mattresses, children killed who were sleeping next to their parents. The UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon said Thursday, "Nothing is more shameful than attacking sleeping children." Did Israel go too far?
Israel cannot have a proportional response if people are firing rockets at their citizens. Can you imagine if one of the contiguous countries to America were firing rockets at America? The same people who are criticizing the Israelis would be going crazy, demanding the president does more. Unfortunately, if Hamas hides among the innocent are going to get killed because Israel just does not have any choice but to stop people Hamas firing rockets at their citizens. They have a right to defend themselves, and America would do exactly the same thing.
Doesn't the Geneva Conventions lay out that you cannot attack schools or hospitals?
Nobody's attacking schools or hospitals. We're attacking Hamas. But Hamas is standing in the middle of a hospital. If they're standing in the middle of a hospital and they're firing rockets at your kids, what would you expect us to do? Would you really want us to not try to stop them? And unfortunately, if there are innocents getting killed at the same time, it's not Israel's fault.
The White House called that attack totally indefensible.
It was. But look, this is why we thought the ceasefire was so important. And Secretary Kerry has been working vigilantly at the president's direction to be a constructive force. It's a devastating situation. Israel absolutely has the right to defend itself, and we are Israel's staunchest ally, but you also can't condone the killing of all of these innocent children. And so we're very concerned. We're monitoring the situation closely, and Secretary Kerry will do everything within his power to try to be helpful here.
You're very close with the president. I mean, how does he feel about this?
He's very, very concerned, obviously.
Is he frustrated by the inability to?
Well, sure he's frustrated, of course. I think everyone involved is frustrated. But you can't let your frustration get in the way of trying to be a constructive player here, and that's what he's determined to do.
Now, look, I wish he would play more golf, okay? But totally indefensible is what she said. Not partially, not understandable, not something concerned about, totally indefensible. The lady who is commonly called the conscience and the force and power behind Barack Obama. Okay? Her background, by the way, is Persian, in case you were wondering. Okay. So, I'm not saying that has anything to do with anything. It's just an observation of fact. And this is Israel and the U.S. are not getting along, at least our administration. They're not selling weapons to Israel. Israel found a way to kind of backdoor that. Now it's been discovered, and our United States government is going to cut them off. And in Lebanon, which is also starting to seethe and having problems, and with Hezbollah, Nasrallah, the head of Hezbollah, said this week, Israel is a cancer, and the ultimate goal should be to remove it. And then we see this rising anti-Semitism all over the world. Natan Sharansky, head of a Jewish organization, predicted the end of Jewish history in Europe because of what's going on there. Even The Guardian was writing out about it. So in the midst of all this turmoil, here's Israel and people trying to attack it. They denigrate it. They lie about it. And yet it exists. I believe in fulfillment of Bible prophecy that Israel, the Jews will be gathered in the land in the last days for God's final plan to work out. Well, that's all I have for a prophecy update. I'll take anybody have any questions real quick? Good, I've depressed everybody so much that I didn't even talk about the economy, so let's pray, and we'll get out of here a little early today. Father, thanks so much for your word. Thanks for letting us know in advance what we could expect in our time and what to do. Lord, steel our minds, steel our hearts, keep us true to your word, in your word, fully committed to you and being guided by your spirit in our daily lives. Lord, help us always be ready to give an answer to those that would approach us about our faith, that we would be able to defend it and explain to them the hope that lies solely in you through the finished work of your Son on the cross for our salvation. Thank you so much for that gift. Bless us as we go this week. In Jesus' name, amen.